Welcome to my presentation. I'm going to try to do about 20 minutes of lots of slides, but it's basically just giving you a little bit of background. It's lots of pictures, don't worry. And tell you a little bit about some of my ideas. And specifically, I want to introduce this tool or framework that I kind of came up with. And it's not very usable. I mean, I use it, but it's more for the ideas that it embodies, but it's also kind of a cool hack, I guess. So I have a video of about 10 minutes, so I could play that, or I could try to actually show you live. Now that we actually are live, we can see what works out the best. But either way, my question, and trying to frame this in a way that both fit with this group and with the fact that this is actually Open Access Week, I thought it would be interesting to look at the link between free and open software, open source software, and scholarly communication. And use the slogan "Publish early, publish often." So, as I said, it's Open Access Week. There's a number of events around at U of T, UTM, and UTSC, and also all around the world. So I encourage you to have a look at those. And open access, though, traditionally is very much focused on taking the finished, peer-reviewed result of your academic publishing and making those PDFs free. And free in this case, sadly, oftentimes means free as in cost, not free as in... there are very few journals that actually use open licenses and so on, so it's literally the least that we can aim for. It's still revolutionary if everyone in the world can get access to things that used to cost thousands of dollars or that were only available by physically going into, the Oxford Library. That still is something that's revolutionary, but obviously we'd like to push it a little bit further. So this is just, one example. It's the Toronto Research Repository. There's all these open access journals that actually you don't have to deposit it yourself because it's automatically open access. But again, most of these journals are technologically not very advanced. They're not very different from their closed access counterparts, apart from the fact that they don't charge money. So we'd like to go beyond this. And I've been experimenting a little bit with this previously. This is from my master's thesis, which I put, so I played with different kinds of formats because I hate looking at double-spaced Times New Roman 12 PDFs of hundreds of pages. So I made it into an ebook, EPUB, Mobi, put it on different places you can download it. I serialized it on my blog so that each chunk of my thesis got its own addressable URL and people could link directly to it. Promoted it on Twitter and had lots of people linking to individual pieces. Had it translated into Chinese because it was talking about China, and now it's being published in a Chinese journal. So I was experimenting with different kind of channels of disseminating this. Took some of the chunks that were kind of standalone pieces and made them into Wikipedia articles. And here's some slides from Anita DeWart, who talked at KMDI, I think a year ago, talking about different really cool ways of taking an article and really making linked data and semantically identifying, rhetorical moves and stuff like that, which I haven't gotten this far, but just to show you that there is some interesting work, and especially in the harder sciences where articles tend to be very formulaic, more so than in, let's say, humanities. So there's some interesting work, and I just showed you 2 seconds of saying, okay, we published this thing, now what could it look like rather than just a dumb PDF? How could we disseminate it to people? But, going beyond that again and thinking about opening up the process of doing research and also making available all the ephemera that is being generated when you do research, which typically does not make it to the final publishing process. Gideon Burton has this nice definition of an open scholar, saying that it's not simply someone who agrees to allow free access and reuse of his or her traditional scholarly articles, but someone who makes their intellectual projects and processes digitally visible and invites and encourages ongoing criticism of their work and secondary use of any or all parts of it at any stage of its development. So this is fairly revolutionary at a point where even the first thing, which he kind of quickly jumps over, not simply someone who does this. Even the first part would actually, for many professors, be seen as fairly revolutionary, but for people who take that as something that they agree with, it's interesting to push into the second phase. And many people will not be comfortable with any use of any material at any time, but we could perhaps approach this ideal. So if we go back to open source and look at some of the inspiration. You know, and you could probably trace some of the inspiration for the open access movement back to open source. Although, of course, the idea of making academic information freely available has probably existed for hundreds or thousands of years before that. I'm not saying it's only a child of the open source movement. In fact, you could probably say that some of the open source inspiration came from the tradition of openness in academia. So there are probably some good papers to be written about that interplay. But either way, there's a link there. But as I said, a lot has been lost in translation. There are a few open access journals that use open licenses, but it's fairly rare. And there's some people who self-publish. You can choose an open license when you publish on Tspace, but again, most people aren't aware of it and probably don't choose to use it. When we talk about open source, access to source code is very important. And well, what does that translate to when we talk about academic publications? It could mean give it to me in an editable format. If you have an open license, I want to be able to edit it. That could be one interpretation. Could mean give it to me in some kind of a semantic format so that I don't have to recreate the text and where it came from. It could also mean give me not only the text but also all the data that you used, the procedures that you used to generate your conclusions. Give me all your notes. If you're doing a humanities thesis, it's not really a database, but it might be all your text notes. Right, so there's no obvious interpretation here, but it'd be interesting to kind of push what does source code mean in this case. And then this thing, which is really important to me, which I've been playing with, is this idea of open development practice, which isn't codified in the GNU public license or anywhere else, but it's what we've kind of come to expect of good open source projects. It's not that something happens all closed up and then they say, yep, this project is finished, and here's the tarball with all the source. And that's it, right? That happens, and we still accept that that's open source. But if we talk about a kind of a good community-based open source project, typically the code will be in a public repository like GitHub or SourceForge. There'll be an open bug database. There'll be a mailing list, and all of the processes will actually happen in the open. And that obviously is very exciting for people to both follow along and actually participate. And that's what has very much inspired me thinking about how could that happen with research. Right, exactly. So there's also some precedents here, and again, much of it comes from the harder sciences. Open notebook science is this phenomenon where people actually put their lab notebooks on wikis or blogs, and part of the idea is that, you know, the concept that you don't publish failed experiments, you only publish the successes. Typically, journals want you to have a success. It's significant and so on. But in fact, the failures could be just as interesting, especially if you have the way of aggregating them or extracting from them. So you have a bunch of people experimenting with this. You have some people experimenting with creating research wikis or PhD wikis. This is a guy who did his PhD thesis about Wikiversity, and he kept all his notes on the public wiki, even meetings with his supervisor, which I thought was quite impressive. And in fact, his supervisor sometimes went in and edited the page and added some details. I haven't gotten that far. I'm not sure my supervisor would really approve of it, but and he has all these readings and stuff. So for me, coming in there and being someone who's interested in something overlapping, you know, this is just an amazing resource. And even though eventually, by now, he's actually published his PhD thesis, of course, there's lots of stuff here that wouldn't make it into a PhD thesis, right? And which otherwise would have just been put in a folder and left to die.
Who is that?
Cormac Lawler. Yeah, I can send you a link if you're interested. So again, I was experimenting with this a little bit for my master's. I did all my writing in Scrivener, which is just this kind of program for creative writing on the Mac, and I had all my notes here as well. And so I wrote a little script that published all of my raw notes to just dumped it on a web page. So this was done post facto. I wasn't planning to do it, and so it wasn't structured for it, and it wasn't open during the process. But after I published my final thesis, I said, okay. I went through and made sure that there was nothing incriminating, and I anonymized all my respondents. And I checked with my supervisor, is it okay if I put out all their interviews in full, as opposed to just the quotes I have in my thesis? And she said, yeah, I mean, you might not want to give away all your valuable material, but if you're so stupid that you actually want to give it, then it's not an ethical problem. So I did that, and I don't think anyone's ever looked at it, but, you know, it's out there. But then I was thinking, okay, I'm doing my PhD now. I want to take a more structured approach to doing this rather than just waiting till the end and dumping, whatever random notes I have. I was quite inspired also by this paper talking about why can't I manage academic papers like MP3s, and talking about the MP3 metadata that you can take a bunch of MP3s from your hard drive to my hard drive, put it in iTunes, put it in a completely different, Ubuntu music manager, and it just recognizes the genres and the metadata, and it's all kind of very nicely integrated. But if I take a bunch of PDFs from your hard drive and put them on my hard drive, nothing happens. There's nothing, there's no metadata embedded. It's also actually possible. Nobody does this, stupidly. And so we're doing a course actually in KMDI where we had to do a design project. And so together with some others, I wanted to look into what would a really good workflow for a researcher look like. Assuming that we couldn't change the entire publishing superstructure of the world, but let's say we had lots of programmers who worked for us, what would it kind of look like? So we made a mock-up where we kind of made screen videos of different programs and then a little bit of editing, so it looked like it was all one program, and just to kind of share our vision for how things could work. And so that's a YouTube video that's available, and we had, you could automatically visualize all these topics and how they link together, and we did this manually. It would be nice if it was automatic. So through all this, I was and you could take notes on your Kindle, and they would automatically be inserted and all that stuff. So all of this kind of work was inspiring to me, and I was thinking, okay, well, this is great, but it's just a video. I want to actually have something like this because I'm doing my PhD. I want to, and I don't know how to manage my own papers and my citations, and I tried all kinds of reference management tools, and they were less than ideal, at least for my purposes, and especially because I want to share this with others. So this summer I spent a bunch of time, way too much time, playing around with different tools, and to me the kind of breakthrough was, so Max has this thing called AppleScript, which is a way for applications to talk to each other, and almost every single application supports at least some functions, and some of them support a huge amount of functions. Although AppleScript is this weird thing that's supposed to look like written English, but it only accepts writing it in a very specific way, and I'm not very good at AppleScript. But I found a bridge to Ruby, which I know a lot more of. And typically, in a whole script, you only need like one call to AppleScript, so it's much easier to then write everything else in Ruby. So then I started playing around with, well, could I integrate Skim, which is this PDF reader where you can annotate and it's open source? Could I integrate that with this citation management system? Could I integrate those two with the Wiki? And lots of playing around, and I came up with this pretty cool system, I think, which basically integrates all these different moving parts. And sadly, the fact that it does that makes it almost impossible for anyone else to install. Even though, of course, it's open source, it's on GitHub, and I have lots of documentation, but you need to like install 10 different pieces of software, and then you need to get them all to talk together, and it's possible. And two other...
install them on Mac.
Yeah, sadly, it's almost all open source, but BibDesk only exists it's open source, but it's only on the Mac and so on. So rather than saying this is the thing in itself that's going to revolutionize anything, it's more hoping that it will inspire other people who actually know how to program to make something that's a lot more smooth that actually normal people could potentially use. And of course, for me, I'm using this on a day-to-day basis. And that's another point, is this idea of having academics who program. I think, this is something that was really iteratively designed by me, using it very heavily on a day-to-day basis in my research. And so rather than having some group who's taking lots of specifications and trying to make something they think will be useful for people, it was something that so it integrates these main tools and lots of others. It has a bunch of scripts to import automatically from Google Scholar and link PDFs and manage PDFs and stuff. You can then open the PDFs in Skim, or it's integrated with the Kindle, which is cool. And you can highlight and take notes and everything. It then automatically exports all of those highlighted clippings to a wiki page, complete with all your nice metadata from BibDesk. And then I have got a lot of like built-in stuff in the wiki that enables you to, for example, take higher level notes, and then use the publication site key to cite these publications, to link them. So the idea was to try to not lose data at any point in the process. We have this great metadata, and then we're citing a publication. We should try to embed that metadata in the citation. So ideally, other people who look at the web page could then import that into whatever citation management they're using or whatever. And also really cool is that I'm using DocuWiki, which is a file-based wiki. It doesn't use a database. It uses files. And what that means is it's very easy to sync using rsync. And so I actually run it locally on my local computer because I want to have access when I'm in a village in China. But one click of a button and about 20 seconds, and I've got a complete copy on my public website where anyone else can look at it. And that's really cool because that was one of my goals, to have both something that was offline and something that I could easily publish to the world. And even though it's really, really hard to install, sadly, 2 other people have managed to install it, and which is really cool, both because it kind of validates the idea and because they're both kind of in my field. So I helped them all quite a lot, but it was very egoistic because now I get access to all their research and all their ideas. It's like this little connection right into their brains. So it's a very egoistic process for me to kind of suck information out of people. So there are 2, one in Carnegie Mellon, one in Sweden, doing their PhDs, who now are publishing their stuff online. Let's see. So challenges, as I said, it really sucks that it's so hard to install this, but that's just the way it is. And one thing I've been thinking about is ways of connecting. So if you're publishing data about an article and I'm publishing data about the same article, how can we link it together? How can we kind of expose that? What kind of nice effects can we have from that? But so I guess you hopefully are curious about seeing this thing. Okay, so let's try to do a little live thing, although it obviously as all live demos probably will break at some point. So this is just my wiki. You see here it's running on localhost, so it's a local thing right now. Of course, if you go to my public website, and I'm probably over Kodak, right? Okay, so there you see once again the advantage of having it on localhost. Basically, we could start by, okay, so I actually can't show you importing a publication because I'm over quota, but that's fine. But it's basically, Google Scholar, you can set in your settings that you want BibTeX, which is just this open format, which is kind of old and has some problems with like ASCII letters and stuff like that, but it's really open. It's supported by almost any single program out there. And so anytime you do a search, you can automatically get BibTeX, and then there's just some scripts that automatically import that. So if you go to BibDesk here, which is the program that I'm using, open source, I have now about 960 publications. Almost all of them I've got PDFs as well. I've got some tags here. So let's say I want to read this publication by Hoppe about collaborative concept mapping tool. That sounds kind of cool. Okay, so I just open that in Skim here, and I can very quickly highlight text like that. I can add some notes.
This is just a feature of Skim.
Yeah, this is just a feature of Skim, which is also open source. Now, here's the new thing. If I press Apple E, and hopefully this works, what it does is Skim has a way of exporting all these notations. And is that thing not running? It is running, okay. Typical. It exports all these, yeah, okay, there we go, thank God. So what you see here is a wiki page that was just generated automatically. You have the metadata for the publication right here. You have the things that I highlighted. You have the little note that I wrote. What's kind of cool is if you click on this hyperlink, it will actually open the PDF in Skim on page 1. Now, here's the cool thing. So basically thinking about what's my cognitive process when I'm reading these articles. What is the most useful way for me to work with articles, to learn and to have something that's useful for me to go back to? And the side wiki is something I came up with that helps me take higher level notes. So I start out by reading the article, I highlight the chunks that I want, I bring them in here, It's just a little piece of JavaScript that gives me the highlighted stuff on the left and this other page on the right, so I can very easily take some key ideas and I save this. And now we have the key ideas here. We have the links here. It also automatically, I could also automatically select pictures. Let's say I want this table. Why is it doing that? It's weird. Okay, anyway. Interesting. Usually you can have pictures. And sorry?
You don't need to reload it.
Well, I think there's something wrong with my keyboard shortcut because it's not supposed to open it when I press that button. But anyway, no, I have pictures on lots of these. Now, the cool thing basically is that this thing here is the site key. It's automatically generated when you import something. It's just the last name of the first author, the year, and the first year of the first word of the title. And that is the thing that ties everything together, because when you import a PDF, it automatically gets dumped in this catalog and it automatically gets renamed to the site key. So you have them there, and you see here that the article page will always be in this format. Now what I can do is I can create a new page. Let's say I want to go to a page about visualization. Okay. And let's say I want to make a reference to this article that I just cited, right? So I can copy that reference in a specific format, and if I save that, it shows up as a nicely formatted citation. If I put my mouse over, you get the whole citation, and if you click it, you go to the detail. Now it's slow. What the? Interesting. Somehow it's stealing my DNS, and it goes to the reference page, right? Mm-hmm. That specific thing also works in my WordPress blog. I made a plugin for my WordPress, so whenever I'm blogging about publications, I can just insert that little thing, and you get all the nice metadata. And what I'm working on, I have a very simple script that lets you do that thing when you're editing a journal article. So you're writing in, let's say, multi-markdown text format with some little, and you can just insert all these little citation tags, and you run it through, and it generates nice APA citations or whatever you want. But if you want to generate a wiki page, you'll then have your whole article where every citation links back to a detail page where you have all the raw notes on that citation. So my idea is when I'm doing when my PhD thesis is done, I'll have to do a format that's U of T approves, and I'll put that on tspace. But I'll generate another version that will be on my wiki, where every single citation links back to the first ideas I had when I first read that citation 5 years ago. So that's kind of my idea of open source, and also this idea of connecting it back to the data. And then, of course, it auto generates a bibliography of all your publications. You have a list of the authors, and you can see 98 publications by Marlene. I have some author pages just for myself to keep track of them, and it auto inserts her list of publications. You can go and look at the different publications there. It also picks up the links. So if I link to a publication, for example this one, at another page, it will automatically find it here. So the publication actually that I just did, this one, you see it automatically links to visualization because it keeps those backlinks. So that's also a way of trying to create this network of ideas. And I'm thinking of ways of like actually visualizing, people that are linked to topics and stuff like that. That's basically it. I mean, and then as I said, the idea that I can just press a button and everything you see is then available on the public web for everyone else to look at. So that's my little tool, and those are my ideas that led to that tool. So I think I'll close there.